Hey friends, this is Waylon. I'm back with 3 mindful tips, which I'm doing every Friday at 4 p.m. or 4:02 p.m. Uh, Mountain Standard Time. So the 3 mindful tips, we're going to get right into it and right out of it. So this entire video is going to be like 4 minutes. If right now you want to say where in the world you are, where you're from, where you are right now, it's always nice to see people, see the national community, international community. Mindful community is a big part of what can get us through these crazy times. And these times are crazy. We have a big election coming up, and I hope it's on all of our minds, and I hope we're very involved. That's for the US, but we have Bolsonaro in Brazil or not. And a lot hangs in the balance with these elections. They really matter. All right, here's our mindful tips. Without further ado, boom. So, in my new book, It's Never Too Late to Fall in Love with Your Life, we talk about, we being me, myself, and I, talk about giving ourselves the gift of gap. So there's a lot of noise in this world. There's a lot of live videos. There's a lot of people marketing stuff to you. There's a lot of people trying to get your money. There's a lot of people who want your attention. And a lot of those people who want your attention aren't people at all. They're corporations. So our minds can get full. They can get addicted. They can get speedy. And nature, Mother Nature, the world, human nature can give us the gift, on the other hand, of space. So when there are moments of space, enjoy them. As my parents' Buddhist teacher, Chögyam Trungpa, said, look, this is your world. Look, celebrate. So, here in Boulder, in Colorado, there are gold leaves, yellow leaves, orange leaves, red leaves, green leaves. And before long, there will be no leaves. We just had snow on the mountains 2 days ago. So as we're running around, being busy, being silly, it's so powerful to just give yourself a moment to wake up to these beautiful leaves, to this beautiful nature. And the first mindful tip I want to make is a slightly less romantic one, is called being in line. So a lot of us, when we're in line, we fill the space with our phones, right? Instead, here's the mindful tip. Give yourself the gift of space. A line can be a wonderful opportunity to do nothing, to just look around, to notice the flower arrangement on the coffee table as you're waiting for coffee, to talk with someone behind you in line, to just do whatever. Look at yourself in the mirror on the wall, look at the barista talking with the customers. And when we give ourselves the gift of space, of not filling the space, we can just be present. We can look at our own world. We can begin to appreciate our world and actually notice the details of it. And the magical thing that happens when we notice the details of our world is dun dun, the present moment. And when we come back to the present moment, we give our minds and our hearts the gift of, and what's happening when we do that? We're breathing through stress. We're actually giving our noggins, our old noggins, a chance to have inspiration, new ideas, to find our way through the problems or the challenges that can be very intimidating. I was very intimidated and even a little depressed or freaked out about a problem in my mind for a few days until I went down to my local cafe. I didn't fill the gap in line. I sat down. Some people said, hey, I said, hey, a little community. And then suddenly my mind went, wow, wow, wow. And it figured the challenge out. And the solution to that challenge was, you know what, Waylon, you're probably just scared. You're probably just not ready to open up your heart and you're vulnerable. I went through a breakup recently, without getting into it. It wasn't a big deal. It was a moment of kindness to myself and understanding. And from then on, I had that deep breath and I went forward into life. Number 2 in our mindful tips, and we're doing 3 today, maybe 4 if we're lucky or unlucky. depending how many people are tuned in. Because if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, is it a benefit to anyone? Not necessarily. So please share this if so inspired. Number 2 is vintage for clothing. I just did an interview on our Walk the Talk Show video and podcast series. Check out Elephant's podcast, The Mindful Life, Walk the Talk Show, Waylon Lewis. Check out our video series. I got a brand new spanking YouTube channel I'm rebuilding because our huge old YouTube channel got kind of messed up by Google. We weren't allowed to monetize it because we dared talk about sexuality, which is inappropriate. When really our mission around sexuality is to de-tabooify it, ironically. Not to exploit it, but to de-tabooify it. There are things we need to educate and talk about. We're seeing that with abortion, with women's rights. So yesterday I did a wonderful interview with someone in the fashion industry. She's been in the fashion industry for about maybe close to 3 decades, 2 decades. And we talked about fast fashion. A lot of us already know this, but getting vintage clothing, usually almost on every day, I'm wearing almost all vintage clothing. It's a way to reduce our impact on our planet. We're not shipping stuff, carbon footprint, disgusting fuel in container ships when we click buy on Amazon. It may arrive tomorrow, but the impact on the world, on our planet, on our children's health, on our children's futures is epic. So this is an obvious one, but a lot of mindfulness and mindful tips are going to be obvious. That's okay. It's good for us to remember fast fashion is directly hurting human beings and animals and climate crisis, which is us, the planet, our only home that we need and our children particularly need. So when we buy vintage, much better. Even I'm vegan, even if you're going to buy wool or leather or whatever fur, this is controversial for a lot of people, but there's no controversy that at least when you're getting vintage, the impact is thoroughly reduced. I personally am sympathetic to the view that if you're wearing leather and fur and all that and making it look hip, even if it's vintage, you're inspiring other people to buy it new, which is not so good. Fur is cruel stuff. Cruel, cruel, cruel. So vintage, that's an obvious one. Number 3, timely one, vote. A lot of us are horrified by politics. A lot of us like to get into conspiracy theories. A lot of us, on the other hand, like to sit on our couches and watch Netflix and just, ostrich our way through all this craziness. And I don't blame any of these kind of different, tendencies. Some of us want to avoid the craziness. Some of us want to jump into the craziness. But voting is so important. If we can keep democracy alive, keep voting rights alive, people really fought for voting rights. Our ancestors, our elders, the prior generation, people of color fought for these rights. So don't take it for granted. That's just sitting on your privilege. Vote, vote, vote. And vote, whether you're going to vote for left or right, it is not the same. A lot of people have a lot of false equivalency going on. There's one side that supports, addressing and fighting climate change, protecting voting rights, protecting women's rights, protecting other democracies, not going into crazy wars. But no one's perfect, right? Don't make perfect the enemy of the good. We've all heard that. In any case, vote for those who will support voting protections. Voter fraud is really an overblown kind of GOP Republican Trumpy myth. And, it's much more important to vote, vote, vote. When, as Howard Dean said back in the day, if an overwhelming number of people voted, it would be much harder for corruption, whether it's left or right, up or down, to hide. The more that we're involved, the less shadow there is for corruption to hide. So please vote. If we fail to address climate change over the next 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 years, that's all she wrote. So it really is urgent. Vote. I'm going to give a 4th little bonus mindful tip right now. This is a nerdy one. I'm 48 years old now. And what have I done for the last 20 years? Elephant is now 20 years old. What have I done for the last 20 years? I have spent an inordinate, a ridiculous amount of time looking at screens, working on my laptop. How do I still have 20/20 vision? Number one, I may not have 20/20 vision anymore, but it's pretty damn good. How have I protected my vision? There's a lot that goes into this answer, but here's a very specific partial tip. It's not the whole solution. Make fonts on your laptop, on your phone, bigger than you think you need. Why? Not because you're some grandpa or grandma, not yet. And if you are, great. But because you want to protect your eyes, you want to keep away from eye strain. So I almost never have eye strain because I make fonts on my laptop, on my phone, bigger than most people. I do it in Gmail. I do it everywhere I work. Big fonts. I like big fonts. So there's a lot of other things that go into it. Movement, meditation, biking, going from cafe to office, working at home. Moving instead of just being fixed and absorbed, like the Matrix. It's very good. So, but we'll get into more of that another time. And if you go to our various YouTube channels, Elephant Journal, Waylon Lewis podcast, you'll see a lot more on that kind of mindfulness, dealing with busyness, dealing with work, dealing with stress kind of stuff. Thank you so much. Big love to all of you. And I'll see you again next Friday at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Good to see you guys. And YouTube. And Instagram.